You've probably heard this thing about stories having 3 acts. It mostly applies to movies or TV or what I like to call commercial storytelling. But is it true? Could all stories have 3 acts? If so, is this useful for when you're writing your story? And what the hell is a paradigm shift? Well, today I'll show you why people keep talking about the 3 act structure. I always loved breaking rules that seemed stupid to me. When someone said something had to be done a certain way, I made it my life goal to prove how that wasn't true. So when people kept talking about the 3 acts, I was eager to write anything that didn't fit into that mold. And I could, you can, but whatever came out of that exercise didn't feel like a story. To avoid the 3 acts, I would end up writing something that better resembled a poem, a statement. It sounded like the voiceover for an experimental film. It didn't have the ups and downs of a story. The more I tried to write a story without 3 acts, the more effort I put into understanding what stories were. And whatever they were, they looked like something with 3 acts. So I eventually got to understand it and became so enthralled with that framing that today I'm best friends with the 3 act structure. But how? How did I go from trying to disprove it to fully embracing it? I'll tell you all about it. But you must know that once you hear it, you're never getting this out of your head. Imagine you have a friend who hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Now imagine you want to tell this to someone who doesn't know your friend. Where do you begin? I mean, you could say I have a friend who has 1 million subscribers on YouTube, but that's data, that's information. So let's say you want to deliver this information as a story. And if stories are a way to deliver information with emotion, how would you turn this data point into a story? Well, as we stipulated in the video about what stories are, they are a series of "and then what happened?" So how can you make your hypothetical audience ask that? How do you engage an audience for a story that could fit in one sentence of information? Let's see, first you have to tell them about this friend you have who decided to create a YouTube channel. Then you could say anything about the channel, like the channel's subject, what do they talk about or show in their videos. Then you say that they hit 1 million subscribers with that channel. And that's it, right? I mean, if they're really engaged in your story, they will want to know what happened next. Like, did they give up after hitting this absurd number? Are they now aiming to hit 2 million? Are they rich? Are they happy? So to end it, you could answer any of those questions as a way of replying what happened next. That's how you tell it, right? I mean, let me know in the comments if this scenario is absurd, because I don't think it is. These are the bare bones of a regular small talk story. You could include stuff, but I don't think you could scratch something off. Maybe the last part, but it would feel weird. Here, I have this friend who started a YouTube channel about ceramics. She's got like 1 million subscribers and she still wants more. So like that's the story right there. It's short, not very exciting, but all the ingredients are in place. There's nothing lacking in the information. That person knows a pottery YouTuber who, despite being very successful, is still working to grow her channel. Now, how did we get such an efficient story? We showed the character and a goal, how they tried to achieve it, and what happened after that. Okay, now, if you had to make a movie based on this story, would you have to change the structure to make it work? Let's see. According to the video about what stories actually are, stories are about someone wanting something and not getting it. So we introduced the character and their goal, someone wanting something, and then how they tried to achieve it, not getting it. And then told what happened after that, which in the extended version of this definition was about how stories always reach an outcome. So this fits right in. But how? How does the requirements for a $200 million superhero movie screenplay have the same structure of you talking to someone about your friend? Well, the thing is that both can be divided in 3 parts. So if you want to tell a story, those are the 3 things you must convey. Who wants what, how they go about getting it, and what is the result. Now, I'm not telling you these are the things you have to do to write a story, to build a narrative, to develop a franchise. I'm saying this is what you need to relay whenever you have to tell someone about something. Not in theory, but in practice, in the real world. And that's why the 3-act structure is so hard to avoid. Not because they have the same elements we use when we communicate, but because we communicate in a 3-act structure. That's how we talk, that's how we tell stuff to each other, that's how we deliver information. The 3-act structure is your everyday talk. You don't have to learn about the 3 acts, you just have to remember them. And the reason for that is that we can list these acts as introduction, development, and conclusion, but what these things really stand for is beginning, middle, and end. And I don't think you can avoid this. A story will always have these parts. You always need to know who the story is about, what they're trying to do, how they tried to do it, and what happened after they tried it. If you take out the beginning, we stumble into someone we don't know doing something for some reason. If there's no middle, we see a character achieve something without knowing how. And if there's no end, we're left hanging, wanting to know more. If you try to tell a story avoiding the basic beginning, middle, and end, the audience is left with doubts. So you may not call it acts, you may use a different structure, you may have 5 acts or whatever, but these parts, beginning, middle, and end, will still be there. That's why you can avoid it. I mean, you can do whatever you want. But it's really useful to know what the 3-act structure is about, because it can really help you understand which part of the story you are trying to write. But if it's so basic, so natural and unavoidable, how did we get to stuffy language like paradigm shift? Well, because beginning, middle, and end is so simple that when you're in the thick of figuring out your story, developing your characters, and building your plot, these parts stop being useful because their framing is very broad and what you're doing is really complex and specific. So you need to break this down in a way that is more detailed and functional than saying, yeah, just write your 500-page novel the way you talk to a friend. So let's do this. Let's complicate things to see if these 3 acts can really be helpful. Let's begin with how we name stuff. If they're like the same thing, why call them acts instead of beginning, middle, or end? Well, think of it this way. It's not normal for someone to call salt sodium chloride, unless you are a chemist. So civilians may call it beginning, middle, and end, but writers like you call them acts because you know what each part is doing. You don't use the word structure unless you're the one building something. So we call them acts because we have to be precise about our words. And in doing so, we get 2 things. First, beginning is a very broad term. It's not clear what you're referring to when you talk about the beginning of a story. It could be a lot of different moments. But when you talk about the first act, you know where it begins and exactly where it ends. And the second thing is that when you refer to an act in a story, there's a function attached to it. We know what's supposed to happen in each act. So as we said, the first act is the introduction. Its role is to set things up, present you with the characters, what they want, the setting, and what the situation there is usually like. This last part, the situation, could also be called the paradigm, the way your character and those around them usually see and interact with the world around them. It's how people in the story view reality. That's the paradigm. The second act is where the character tries to get what they want and face the obstacles that stand in their way. We call this the development, where things happen in the story, where we see what was promised in the poster, in the movie trailer, in the premise. Here, the character will do whatever they have to do to achieve their goal and realize what's the real price of getting it. But when the character tries to achieve their goal, they're suddenly trying something new and seeing how the world reacts to it. They start working with a new set of rules, which means the paradigm changes around them. For example, you can be a regular person one day, but if the next day you start posting videos on the internet for the whole world to see, you are really exposing yourself and people will react to you in a very different way. And that's why we call the change in the character's perspective and their actions a paradigm shift. So yeah, that's what that means. The third and final act is the conclusion, is where we see how things turn out, what happened, what's the outcome. Whatever the character sets out to do, once they try it, it will have a result. They either do it or not. They either get it or they don't, and the story ends on that result and its repercussions for the future. Going back to our YouTuber friend, I said that to tell about them in a basic story structure, first you have to tell them about this friend you have, who decided to create a YouTube channel, so that's Act 1. Then you could say anything about the channel, like what the videos are about, and that's Act 2. Then you say that they hit 1 million subscribers, and then speak about what they're doing next. Now, not that anyone is counting, but this 3-act structure kind of has 4 acts. Like, how does that make any sense? Well, don't worry, it's perfectly normal. Imagine the beginning and the end as the crusts in a slice of bread. Most of the bread is this part in the middle, right? Well, that's Act 2. Act 2 is commonly the largest part of the story, so structurally we consider it to be double the other acts. Which is a problem because as much as you hear people talking about the 3-act structure, you will hear people saying that the second act is a horrible ordeal that everyone hates to write because it never ends and we all feel lost while doing it, therefore it doesn't help that it's also the longest one. So to make things easier on the function side, the second act is divided into 2 parts. In very broad terms, you could say that one part is fun but uncomfortable, and the other is hard and ultimately rewarding. And here we get to something really important about the difference between the framings of beginning, middle and end and the 3-act structure, which is precision. Depending on who's talking, the point where the beginning turns into the middle can be a little blurry, while the division between acts 1, 2 and 3 is razor sharp. But how? Where is that division? Where does one act end and the other one begins? If each act has its function, the point where they change is the end of one function and the beginning of the next. So the development starts after we're done with the introduction, right? Well, hold on to your seats because we're about to clarify the shit out of this. In Act 1, we introduce the character and their goal, setting up the conflict that's gonna happen in Act 2. The moment where Act 2 begins is when that character takes action to face that conflict in order to get what they want. So imagine your friend really wants to have a YouTube channel. They love the idea of making videos and interacting with the audience through the comments. They're really enamored with this vision of being a full-time YouTuber, but they don't want to half-ass it. They don't want to do a mediocre job. If they become a YouTuber, they want to do it big and have 1 million subscribers, which is not gonna be easy. It's really hard to hit a number so huge. So maybe they're not cut out to do this. Well, all of that was Act 1. The moment they decide to go forward with that plan, the minute they take action, when they finally open the YouTube tab and create a new channel, their channel, that's where we enter Act 2. So Act 2 is about the conflict in that story. In this case, the conflict is everything that the character has to do as a YouTuber to get 1 million subscribers. Research topics, study how the platform works, make thumbnails, learn about lighting, write scripts, review channel analytics, try different stuff to see what sticks, watch other channels, edit for hours and hours, try to stop hating the sound of their own voice, all while we see the number of subscribers getting higher and higher. Like, you can really envision the montage of them doing all this stuff with exciting music playing in the background. And that's because training montages are a second act thing. But as we said, the second act has 2 parts, one mostly positive and the other mostly negative. That general rule comes from one part having a lot of progress, they're finally acting on their goals, learning new stuff and doing what they always wanted to do but were afraid of trying. However, in the second part of the second act, they reach a plateau. The newness and the progress fades away, and what's left is the real struggle of doing this at a higher level. Things can be so difficult in this part that your character may as well give up. They can really regret this decision and the naivety of thinking they could do it. But if things get that hard, where do we go from here? Where does the third act begin? In the final act, you have the resolution, the outcome, the result of this whole story, right? But here there are 2 important things. One, is that the ending must be a consequence of the whole story. Nothing can happen here that hasn't been established before. The end cannot be about how your YouTuber friend becomes a dentist, because nothing in the story pointed that way. The second is that this ending must be brought about by the character's actions. Just like they had to do something in order to get into the second act, for the third act, they have to do something to resolve the conflict they're in. The YouTuber can, for example, make a video so amazing that their subscriber count skyrocket, finally reaching 1 million. The important thing is that something they do sets off the resolution, and whatever does that brings us into Act 3. So in the first act we introduce the character and their goal. When the character does something to actually start going after their goal, we go into the second act. There, the character does whatever it takes to succeed, learning a lot on the way, but later they stop making progress and really see how difficult it is to attain whatever they were reaching for, to the point where they can regret even trying. And those are the two parts of the second act. But when the character realizes or does something different to go over that final and seemingly unreachable hurdle, we go into the third act, where they finally resolve the conflict, either getting what they wanted or not. Because yeah, you can resolve the conflict in a positive or negative way, but both results must come about by the character's actions. And that's how the 3-act structure works. It's very simple, very easy to use, and somewhat intuitive. What I love in story structures like this one is how much it dictates what you should do, while leaving enough room to really explore creative options while doing it. I know a lot of this looks arbitrary and made up, and it absolutely is, like the second act has 2 parts, but we still don't call it a 4-act structure. But it's good to remember that this whole thing is not natural, it's not necessarily true, it's just the things we invented to make storytelling more understandable and easier to do. What we're really doing here is breaking big tasks into little tasks, cutting the endless marathon of creating a story into doable sprints. So don't worry if it doesn't look like the 3-act structure descended from heaven, just try to find out if this can help you write the stories you imagine. And if it works for you, it works and it's perfect, and if it doesn't, then it's trash. Move on and don't look back. But I can say that it did help me a lot, so I hope it helps you too. Because I feel that the acts and their functions are the closest thing to the beginning, middle and end that any story must have. So the 3 acts are not a list of things you have to write in order to tell a story, they're the way we always tell them. Now let's go write.